Hey guys. Now, before I introduce myself, I'm going to ask you guys a few questions. By a raise of hands, who here has been in a relationship? Don't be shy. Aw, you guys. All right. Who here has been in a breakup? Aw, you guys. All right. Who here sent a breakup text? I knew you have. All right. Let's take it one step further. Who here has made a breakup text and turned it into a song that millions of people would listen to for the next year? You. That's right. So my name is QARAN, with a Q, and I've had a pretty crazy life. I was born right here in Bombay. At a very young age, I moved to Indonesia, and I was so enamored by how beautiful the city was. And the streets were clean, there was no poverty. Sounds pretty nice, right? Well, long story short, a couple of years later, there was this massive political coup, and me and my family narrowly escaped a gruesome end by the hands of an angry mob and got evacuated to Singapore. Sounds pretty traumatic, right? Wrong. Best evacuation ever. I mean, we got to Singapore, and everyone felt so bad for us. They thought all us kids were so traumatized, so they gave us all toys and candy. I had very good memories of that evacuation. In Singapore, I got used to the big city life. So I did the next logical thing and moved to a sleepy little town in the United Kingdom called Farnham. Now, this is the kind of place where a fish and chip shop would close at 3 p.m. for the day because they didn't want it turning into a party town. Coincidentally, this was also the place I decided to take my DJing career really seriously. Soon after that, I moved to London to do my master's. Now I know what you're thinking. Where do you move next? Was it Brazil? Was it Spain? Was it China? Not now. But, as luck would have it, I now live 10 minutes away from here. 20 minutes if there's no police nakabandi. See, what I'm trying to tell you here is that life is notoriously unpredictable. As they say, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. Now, I know this will make some of you feel powerless to the powers that be. It might make you feel ineffectual. But I'm here to tell you why adaptation has been my single greatest power and the greatest catalyst in my personal and professional life. Let's start from the start. I was a kid when my mom gave me a secondhand Sony cassette Walkman for my birthday. Now, this Walkman had a cassette in it that belonged to the previous owner. And as a 6-year-old, I didn't really have the dispensable income to go out and buy a bunch of cassettes. So I listened to this cassette every day for the next 3 or 4 years. What it mostly had in it was a bunch of 90s R&B music. So essentially, I was a 6-year-old kid listening to Tony Braxton, all up in my feelings, missing girls I hadn't even met yet. But I kept listening to it, man. It was great music. It was around this time that my mom told me we were moving to Indonesia. I was excited. In Indonesia, my mom thought, all right, he's getting into music. Let me try and nurture this talent. So she put me into guitar classes. I was so excited. I was going to be like one of those rock stars I heard on that one cassette tape for the last 4 years. So excited. I got to my first class, then I finished my first class, and I just hated it. I hated it. The teacher would keep slapping me on the wrist every time I played the wrong chord. He kept using words like minor and major. None of this appealed to me. So my mom took me out of the class, and we thought that was it. Music would be something that I experienced passively for the rest of my life. Or so we thought. Soon after, I moved to Singapore. Around the year 2005, I met a friend called Nicholas Ali Shaw. He was a guy from Trinidad and Tobago, near Jamaica in the Caribbean. Now, he used to be a DJ in the Caribbean, and he used to DJ mostly dancehall music. So, he taught me how to DJ. So I started learning the basics, and I was instantly hooked. When I first started to DJ, I was just trying to learn the basics of beat matching, tempo, key. But The most instantly gratifying thing about it was whenever I did something cool, he'd say, "Yeah, man!" It was awesome. But I started DJing every chance I could. I would DJ at clubs I was too young to be at. I started learning everything I could, but eventually I got bored because I don't want to DJ and play other people's music. I wanted to make my own music, my own art. So I started learning how to produce. I'm not gonna lie to you. In the start, I sucked. I was so, let me tell you how much I sucked. I was so bad that my mom, who loves me, told me that your music stresses me out. Mind you, this is a woman who told me I was handsome when I had a mushroom haircut and a unibrow. Go figure. But I kept at it. I kept trying to learn every little thing I could by myself. Around this time, I moved to the UK. Remember that sleepy little town I told you about? So I moved there, and man, there was literally nothing to do in this town. And I remember there was a week where we got snowed in, and there was nothing you could do except two things. Either look out the window and literally watch the snow melt, or get to work. So that's what I did. I spent that week making about 100 beats, and at the end of the week, I sent all those beats to a bunch of random record labels and A&Rs around the world. I didn't hear back from any of them. Until one day, I walked home from potentially one of the worst days of my life. You know, the kind of day where like nothing goes your way. I walked in covered in snow, drenched, and I did what I usually would do during moments like this. I go and make some music to vent. So as I got on my laptop, I opened it up, and suddenly got a notification. It was from Shady Records, Eminem's record label, saying that they were considering one of my beats for one of their albums. Man, I was so excited. I thought this was it. That was actually the moment that I decided that this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. Now, did my music end up on Eminem's album? No, it didn't, because that's not the way the music industry works. That's not how life works. But it was the most money and only money I'd ever made doing music. Now, in hindsight, when I think about it, that ended up on season 16 of America's Next Top Model with some model crying while the music played in the background with her talking about, "I hurt my ankle and then I couldn't walk down the aisle," and it was all very, very sad. Every musician's dream, right? But it was the first dollar I'd ever made off music, and I wasn't about to stop there. Around this time, I'd been working with like a cheap laptop and like one of those, you know, those headphones you get off like some shady Chinese websites. So that's pretty much what I was working with. I knew that if I had to get to the next level, I would need to up my game a little bit. So I started working any job I could do. I was working in grocery stores. I was doing pretty much any hustle I could to raise the money to buy some speakers, a keyboard, an audio interface, and a decent laptop. When I got it, I also realized that around that time, YouTube was not what it is today. If you had to learn something, you literally had to learn by trial and error or get an education. Until then, I've been learning through trial and error. I decided it was time for me to get an education. So I also realized that I could only afford 1 year of an education at that time. So I applied to about 10 different foundation programs. I got rejected by all of them. I felt demotivated. I felt like I wasn't good enough. On a whim, I applied to a 1-year postgraduate program at the University of Westminster in audio production. I didn't even have the heart to fill in another application essay talking about why my music was good. I just wrote my name, my date of birth, and I just attached everything I'd worked on over the last 3-4 years. A week later, I got an unconditional acceptance from the university. I was so happy. I was finally going to start the right journey towards what I wanted to do. When I started my master's, it taught me everything that I wanted to learn. It was like just a waterfall of information. When I finished my degree, I thought, this is it. I'm ready to live the life I'd worked so long to live. And I'd applied to jobs in Spain, Germany, Paris. I even got accepted into some of them. But In case you haven't been paying attention, life doesn't work that way. Due to unforeseen circumstances, I had to fly to India and move to India overnight. So I packed my bag and I moved to India. Now, mind you, I hadn't lived in India for a long, long time. My Hindi was not good. And the only Hindi I knew from Bollywood movies my mom would watch. So on the plane ride to India, I watched Jodha Akbar. This resulted in me telling a rickshaw driver that did not drop me at my destination. I told him, "Bhaiya, tumne to mujhe meri manzil tak nahi pahunchaya." The look he gave me, but that's what he told me. Now, I got here and I was like, maybe I just need to quit music to pay the bills. Maybe I just need to get, a regular job. But I couldn't do it, man. So I got myself an unpaid internship at a studio as an assistant. My job, essentially, was to get people coffee, open the door. Open the door, get people coffee, right? And if I was lucky, I would have a day where I get to press the big red button that would turn the whole studio on. That was usually the highlight of my day. Now, this isn't how I expected my career in music to start, but man, I went with it. I used this opportunity to be a fly on the wall and just observe the sound engineer that I was working for. I observed how he worked with sound. I observed how the industry worked. I observed who were the players and how they played the game. Eventually, during this time, I was also spending any time I got spare to go from studio to studio, looking for a creative outlet in the form of a music producer. This was a largely futile exercise until the day that it wasn't. Because one day, I ended up at a studio. Now, this was the same studio that the rickshaw driver who hadn't dropped me to my manzil had actually dropped me. Turns out it was my manzil. Because when I walked into that studio, there were three very familiar characters who I recognized. Their names were Shankar, Ehsan, Loy. They were nice enough to ask me my name, what I do, and I told them, I was like, I'm a producer, I make some beats, this is fire. And, and they go, all right, cool, well, we're on our lunch break, play us something. So I go in, I play them 4 of my best beats. I'm just there like, oh my God, I hope they like it, I hope they like it, I hope they like it. He didn't really say a lot, he said he'd be in touch. Now, I usually know what that means. They're not gonna be in touch. Fast forward a month, I was at home just working, and at 3 p.m. I get a call from them saying, hey man, we're at Yashrod Studios working on our album, and we kind of want you to co-produce it for us. I packed my bags faster than I did the day I got evacuated to Singapore and, and got to Yashrod Studios. I was about to enter a room with 3 of the most iconic figures in Indian music that I grew up listening to. And there was a table with my name on it. I don't think they could tell at the time, or maybe they could, but I was shaking with nerves. But I sat down there and I got to work. I produced a bunch of albums for him. Around that same time at Yashraj, there was a man with long hair who was working on Dhoom 3. That man introduced himself as Pritam Chakrabarti. So he told me one day, not at 3 p.m., because that's not how he works, he called me at 3 in the morning and said, there's an album we gotta work on, and it has to be done by tomorrow, so can you please come down right now? I was like, all right, cool. So I get to the studio. The same day, I set up a studio in his room and worked on his next 5 to 6 albums. I was working about 20 hours a day. I lost about 10 kilos in that process, and I loved it because I was making good money, paying the bills, doing what I love, or thought what I loved. Until one day, I realized, this isn't what I want to do. I'm making music that's being played all around the country, but it wasn't my music, it wasn't my expression, it wasn't even my name, but more importantly, it wasn't my sound. So I decided to pack up the studio and go home and self-reflect. I didn't do anything for a couple of weeks, but one day I decided, all right, let's start. Let's just start making your own music. So I started. All I could do was make the kind of music that I thought would work here. None of it was my kind of music, and it didn't work. I sounded like everybody else in the country. Until one day, I decided that I'm gonna just try and make something that I wanna make, and I didn't even know how to, because it had been so long that I was producing other people's music. Now around this time, I decided I wanna take myself seriously as an artist. So every music director that called me, I had to say no, because if I didn't take myself seriously, nobody else would. As the bank account was depleting, the phone stopped ringing, and the clock was ticking. So I realized that I needed to do something to make some money. So I started making music for ads. And it just so happened that I was working on an ad for the brand called Reason, which is Sonam and Rhea Kapoor's fashion brand. And they had heard of me from somewhere, so Rhea called me in for a meeting. And she was like, hey, so I'm working on this film called Vera the Wedding, and we need a song for it. And I told her, I was like, all right, give me 3 days, and I'll make something. I went home, I started. Everything sounded like garbage. Now, around this time, I was going through a breakup. Remember the one I talked about in the start? I was going through a breakup. And I had to urgently fly to Delhi. So I'm on the plane, and I'm typing out this long breakup text to my ex. And right before I was about to hit send, I decided not to hit send. And I started humming it to myself. And I decided that this is something different. I quickly ran to the airplane bathroom, and I recorded it on my phone. When I came out, everyone was looking at me, but I didn't care, because I knew I finally made something that was me, that was my life, and that would change my life. I came back to Bombay, I met Rhea, and I told her this is what I've made, and it sounded something a little bit like this.
कानों में ही दिल दी गल कह पाऊंगा तेनू हसदा वेख के जगनू मैं भुल जाऊंगा नचदी कल्ले कैसे मैं रह पाऊंगा तो अब तू छड़ दे ओनू जो है तेरे नाल नखरे क्यों कर दिए मैनू जचदा नहीं किन्ना सवाल कर दिए ना मैं सुनदा नहीं होर दस किन्नी तारीफां चाहदी तैनू 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 क्यों समझे न बातें मेरी पहले ही लड़दी सूरत ये बोली सीरत मेरी बेवफा समझू मैं इशारे तो किन्नी बारी भी कहंदी ना तो आजा चल मेरे नाल नखरे क्यों कर दिए मैनू जचदा नहीं किन्ना सवाल कर दिए ना मैं सुनदा नहीं होर दस किन्नी तारीफां चाहदी तैनू होर दस किन्नी तारीफां चाहदी तैनू होर दस किन्नी तारीफां चाहदी तैनू होर दस किन्नी तारीफां चाहदी तैनू
So I played this demo to Rhea Kapoor. We locked it on the spot, and as they say, the rest is history. Thank you so much.